In the dusty corridors of history, where the dust of ages settles on gilded frames, there hangs a single portrait. This is not merely a painting, it is a verdict delivered in brush and oil, a sentence over which the scornful laughter of generations has echoed for 300 years. What we see is not a face, but a grotesque mockery, a cruel caricature crafted by an anonymous executioner, palette in hand. He locked his victim in a gilded prison, and ever since, the world has known her only as the hideous princess, the absurd queen whose very likeness became a joke. History, it seems, has passed its judgment, and the verdict is final. She was ridiculous, full stop. But what if I told you that all of this is a grand deception? That behind this caricature lies a drama of Shakespearean proportions, a story of a shattered destiny, of icy loneliness, and of a love that became both a curse and a weapon in the hands of a calculating cynic. This is a tale not just of a woman, but of an entire kingdom, consumed by a web of betrayal, where the throne became a bargaining chip in a ruthless game. Prepare yourselves. We are about to pull back the velvet curtain on this mystery, and you will see not distorted features, but a living, suffering human being. And then you will understand that the most terrible cage is not the walls of a palace, but the merciless mirror of others' opinions. So, who is she, our heroine, frozen in the amber of another's mockery? Her name is Ulrika Eleonora, Princess of Sweden. She came into the world in 1688, in the dead of winter, within the Stockholm castle, whose grim walls had witnessed the birth and decline of an entire dynasty. She was the youngest, the last child of the royal family, a position that is so often a ticket to the shadows, to the gallery seats on the grand stage of history. Her father was King Charles XI, a stern, almost ascetic ruler, a man who had restored order with an iron fist to a kingdom exhausted by endless wars. He was less a warrior king and more an administrator king, and his subjects knew him as a strict and demanding figure who forgave weakness in neither himself nor others. Her mother was a Danish princess who bore the same name, Ulrika Eleonora. And it is here that the first act of our drama begins, an act of dazzling contrast. If King Charles was the personification of Scandinavian severity and order, his wife was the embodiment of light, warmth, and an almost ethereal beauty. Contemporaries unanimously declared the queen was magnificent, but her appearance was merely a reflection of her soul. She was an angel of mercy in the cold and pragmatic world of high politics. Her life was dedicated to charity. She founded orphanages, aided the widows of soldiers, and redeemed the pawned belongings of the poor so they would not lose their last possessions. The people adored her, seeing in her their protector, the sole beacon of compassion in the icy realm of absolute monarchy. And this stern, withdrawn king, feared by the entire country, did not simply love his wife. He worshipped her. Their marriage, arranged for political reasons, became one of the rarest examples in the history of royal houses of a genuine, deep, and faithful love. Charles, who allowed no excesses in his life, found in his wife his only weakness and his only joy. He had no mistresses, kept no scandalous affairs, a phenomenon that was almost supernatural for a monarch of that era. Every day free from the affairs of state, he spent with her. When she passed away, according to the court, the king locked himself in his chambers and wept, as even common men who have lost everything do not weep. He later confessed that with her passing, all happiness had vanished from his soul forever. This was the family into which our Ulrika was born. On one side, a father, an unyielding ruler with a heavy, resolute face. On the other, an angel mother whose beauty was the stuff of legend. It would seem that nature should have generously endowed their daughter. But the genetic lottery is a cruel and unpredictable thing, playing by its own unknowable rules. Let's examine the portraits of her parents, as a criminalist might study evidence. King Charles had a large nose with a prominent bridge, a family trait, a sign of power and breeding. The Queen Mother, for all her refinement, had a nose with a barely perceptible thickness at the tip. And so, by a cruel twist of fate, their youngest daughter inherited both these features. They didn't merely combine, they collided, creating on her face the very dissonance, the very flaw that would become her curse. She received her father's heaviness and her mother's roundness, but instead of harmony, the result was a caricature. This was not just a physical imperfection, it was a brand seared upon her by nature itself. In a world where a princess's face is her greatest asset, her calling card, and the key to a brilliant match, Ulrika Eleonora was bankrupt from birth. Her arrival did not bring the joy her elder siblings had. She was a quiet, sickly child, and, most devastating for a royal, she was plain. And this fact, from her very first days, defined her place in the complex family hierarchy, pushing her to the furthest periphery into the cold shadow of her more fortunate brother and sister. A royal family is not merely a union of people, it is a constellation where every star fights for its own light. For some, the light is bright, almost blinding. For others, it is dim, barely visible against the galactic radiance. In the family of Sweden's King Charles XI, there were 7 children, but the harsh northern climate and the merciless diseases of the era thinned their ranks, leaving only 3. 3 heirs, 3 rivals, 3 entirely different universes colliding under one roof. And in this collision, our Ulrika Eleonora was destined from the start to play the part of cosmic dust, an insignificant satellite in the orbit of 2 dazzling celestial bodies. At the zenith of this family firmament shone the eldest princess, Hedvig Sophia. She was not just a child, she was a triumph of the dynasty. Nature, as if to apologize for its future mistake with Ulrika, had bestowed upon her all its best gifts: her mother's beauty, her father's sharp mind, an innate charm, and that effortless grace with which one masters both academia and the hearts of men. Hedvig Sophia was the living embodiment of the ideal princess, a precious jewel in the crown, the country's chief diplomatic asset. Everyone adored her, her parents, the courtiers, her tutors. She was witty and graceful. Her word was law in childhood games, her smile the highest reward. She married her cousin, the Duke of Holstein-Gottorp, strengthening a vital political alliance, and gave the dynasty an heir, a son in whom they saw the future of Northern Europe. Her life seemed a perfect symphony, but fate cut it short on a tragic note. Her husband, a close friend of her brother the king, met his end on the battlefield, and the young widow was left alone. Later, it was whispered at court, a mere nobleman captured her heart, but her duty to her son and the memory of her husband forced her to reject personal happiness. And then came the smallpox. She contracted it while selflessly nursing her sick son. The boy survived, but his mother, the beautiful and brilliant princess, departed this world at 27, leaving behind a legend of perfection and maternal sacrifice. The second son of this system was her brother, the sole surviving son, the future King Charles XII. But this was not a warm, life-giving son. It was a cold and furious star, a comet hurtling along its own untamable trajectory. Charles was not a man, but a force of nature, a hurricane in a crown. From a young age, he was interested in nothing but war, hunting, and Spartan exercises. He despised luxury, comfort, and it seemed all human attachments. Upon ascending the throne, he turned his entire life and the life of all of Sweden into one unending military campaign. For 20 years, he never left the saddle, waging the grueling Great Northern War. His name thundered across Europe, inspiring admiration in some and terror in others. He was a military genius who knew no fear, the last European monarch to personally lead his soldiers into battle and share their fate. He fought against Peter the Great, experiencing both dizzying victories and a crushing defeat at Poltava. He spent 2 years in Ottoman captivity, turning his confinement into yet another theater of political intrigue. His was a life from a Norse saga, the life of a hero, a titan, but it had no room for a wife, for children, or for quiet family joys. He departed as he had lived, leaving no heirs, struck down by a stray bullet to the temple during yet another siege. And where, in all this epic of beauty, heroism, and self-sacrifice, was our Ulrika? She was there, in the darkest, quietest corner of the palace, an unnoticed shadow against the brilliance of her siblings. If Hedvig Sophia was the embodiment of success, Ulrika, from childhood, bore the mark of a chronic failure. It was her misfortune not only to be born plain, but also, as those around her believed, not particularly gifted of mind. She was slow, struggled with her studies, and above all, was incredibly sensitive. Any harsh word, any sideways glance brought her to tears, which, in the stern atmosphere of the royal court, was seen as an unforgivable weakness. In her family, she was not just overlooked, she was openly disliked. Universal adoration was lavished upon Hedvig Sophia, who, using her position, turned her younger sister's life into a series of petty humiliations. She devised sophisticated pranks, subtle, venomous barbs that Ulrika, in her simplicity and timidity, simply did not know how to answer. She was the eternal target of mockery, the whipping girl, a living reminder that nature sometimes falters. It cannot be said she was entirely without talents. She discovered a gift for music. The harpsichord was her only friend, her secret refuge where she could pour out her soul without fear of judgment. Her fingers danced across the keys with the lightness and grace so lacking in her life. Furthermore, she had a surprisingly fine figure. She was statuesque, tall, with an innate royal posture, and her hands, as the few who noticed them remarked, were elegant and beautiful. But it was all for naught. In a world that judges by the face, these virtues were merely unfortunate details that only highlighted the flawed whole. What did it matter how she played the harpsichord if her nose provoked smirks and her eyes seemed too round and vacant? And so she grew up, a quiet, modest, downtrodden girl, resigned to her secondary role never daring to dream that one day fate would shuffle the deck and her playing card would suddenly become the ace of trumps. Fate is a great dramatist, and at times it pens the most incredible scripts using the most unexpected props. For years, Ulrika Eleonora had been merely a dusty decoration on the stage of Swedish history, a figure everyone was accustomed to ignoring. But then the curtain falls on one act and another begins. First, the tragic passing of her elder sister, the brilliant Hedvig Sophia, removed one of the key cards from the family deck. Then her brother, the warrior King Charles XII, became ever more entangled in his endless war, making it clear to all that neither family nor heirs were part of his life's plan. And suddenly, all the eyes of Europe's courts, like compass needles, turned toward Stockholm, toward the one they had never before thought to remember. What occurred was something known in the language of cynical politics as a reassessment of assets. The plain, quiet, downtrodden princess was suddenly transformed into the most valuable prize on the European marriage market. Her personal qualities no longer mattered. Her face, her intellect, her character, all of it became secondary. What mattered was the royal blood in her veins and the fact that she was, in essence, the only remaining key to the Swedish throne, to control of the Baltic, to influence over all of Northern Europe. Yesterday's unsellable asset had, in a flash, soared in price, and a procession of suitors from the most powerful houses of the continent began to make its way to her court. Imagine the scene: a young woman who had considered herself invisible her entire life was suddenly besieged by suitors whose very names sounded like peals of thunder. The heir to the British throne, the future King of Prussia, the Crown Prince of Denmark. All of them wanted her hand, and with it, her crown. But here, too, a cage awaited her, albeit a gilded one. Her fate was being decided by others. First, her stern grandmother, who had taken charge of the royal children after their mother's passing, decisively rejected all proposals, deeming them either not advantageous enough or politically dangerous. She held her granddaughter close, like a trump card to be played at the most opportune moment. Then, after her death, the right of veto passed to her brother, the king. Charles XII, thousands of miles from home on campaigns and battlefields, nonetheless, kept a watchful eye on dynastic affairs. He, too, was in no hurry to marry his sister off, perhaps fearing that a powerful brother-in-law might challenge his authority or entangle Sweden in new unnecessary alliances. And so, Ulrika remained in a state of suspended animation, a desirable bride for all of Europe, yet a lonely recluse in her own palace. And then he appears on the stage. Fredrik, or Fredrik, as he was known in the Swedish style, Landgrave of Hesse-Kassel. He was neither the heir to a great empire nor a mighty monarch. He was a professional soldier, an adventurer, and most importantly, a master fortune hunter. This was a man with cold eyes and a warm smile, a predator who had perfected the art of deception. He already had experience with an advantageous marriage. His first wife had been a Prussian princess, his own cousin. That union lasted 5 years, during which the unfortunate woman was perpetually ill until she departed this world, leaving him with no children and, more importantly, no significant political influence. He was now free and in search of new, more substantial prey, and he found it. Fredrik understood what other, more noble suitors did not. He understood that the key to this princess lay not in political bargaining or demonstrations of power. The key was her vast, gaping loneliness, her lifelong craving for warmth and validation. He did not seek her hand from her formidable brother. He set out to win her heart. He was the first man in her life who looked at her not as a dynastic prize, but as a woman. He did not notice her plain face, or at least he pretended not to. He admired her playing of the harpsichord, praised her posture, and complimented her elegant hands. He listened to her, speaking with her for hours about trivial things, giving her the attention she had been denied since childhood. For Ulrika, accustomed to mockery and neglect, this was nothing short of a miracle. She, the browbeaten and insecure princess, felt for the first time desired, interesting, loved. Of course, she fell in love, utterly, blindly, with all the force of a desperate soul that has finally found its safe harbor. In 1715, while her brother was far away and her stern grandmother rested in her tomb, they were married. For a time, he played his part to perfection. He was a tender and attentive husband, and her love for him grew with each passing day, transforming into a blind, unconditional devotion. And then, what Fredrik had been waiting for so long finally happened. In 1718, news arrived from Norway. King Charles XII had met his end from an enemy bullet. The throne of Sweden was vacant. It was then that the calculating husband revealed his true brilliance. While other claimants, chief among them Ulrika's nephew, the son of her late beautiful sister, were gathering supporters, Fredrik launched into a whirlwind of activity. He wove intrigues, negotiated with members of parliament, made promises, persuaded, and intimidated. And in the end, thanks to his cunning and energetic maneuvers, it was his wife, Ulrika Eleonora, who was proclaimed the reigning queen of Sweden. She ascended the throne, blinded by happiness and gratitude to the man who, she believed, had given her not only love, but a crown. She did not yet know that this was merely the first step in his intricate game, and that she had yet to pay the true price for this throne. The crown proved too heavy for one who had spent her life with her head bowed. Ascending the throne after her heroic brother, Ulrika Eleonora faced a reality for which she was utterly unprepared. Ruling a state is not like playing a fugue on the harpsichord. It required not sensitive fingers, but an iron grip, not a timid heart, but a cold, discerning mind. And the new queen possessed none of these things. She was, without question, a kind and pious woman, but completely unskilled in the labyrinths of high politics. Her childhood insecurities, her lack of confidence, her habit of obeying rather than commanding, all of it turned her into a bewildered and indecisive ruler. Every document seemed too complex, every decision insurmountably difficult. She was lost in meetings of the State Council, easily swayed by others' influence, and frequently changed her own decrees, causing chaos in the country's administration. Moreover, the times were difficult. The era of absolutism, personified by her father and brother, had ended with the last shot of the Great Northern War. Sweden was exhausted, its treasury empty, and the aristocracy and parliament, known as the Riksdag, were hungry for revenge. They had tired of the dictatorship of warrior monarchs and wanted to reclaim their power and privileges. When a weak, insecure woman took the throne, they saw their chance. Before crowning Ulrika Eleonora, The Riksdag forced her to sign a new constitution that sharply limited royal power. Henceforth, the monarch could not make key decisions without the consent of Parliament. She became, in essence, a hostage of aristocratic factions, a puppet in their hands. And in this complex political struggle, she felt infinitely alone and helpless. She had only one support, one advisor, one person she trusted implicitly, her beloved husband, Fredrik. She had ascended the throne with the naive belief that they would rule together as one. She saw him as her co-ruler, her king consort, who would shoulder the burden of state affairs while she would be his faithful companion and assistant. But the Riksdag thought otherwise. The Swedish aristocrats were deeply suspicious of this foreign prince, seeing in him an ambitious upstart who sought to usurp power. They categorically opposed the idea of a joint reign. Fredrik was denied the title of king and forbidden from interfering in the country's governance. It was a blow to his pride, but he was not about to give up. He began to act through his wife. A period of utter chaos ensued. Fredrik was a constant presence at council meetings, whispering advice into the queen's ear. She, not understanding the substance of the issues, blindly broadcast his will. This led to constant conflicts with ministers and members of the Riksdag. The situation grew increasingly tangled and unbearable. Ulrika Eleonora found herself caught between two fires. On one side, the pressure from Parliament; on the other, the ambitions and demands of her adored husband. She was torn between her duty as a ruler and her duty as a loving wife. And this internal conflict finally broke her. She did not want this power, this responsibility, this endless struggle. She wanted only one thing: peace and happiness beside the man she loved more than life itself. And then a solution formed in her mind that shocked even the most seasoned politicians. If they would not let her rule with her husband, then she would not rule at all. If Sweden would not have Fredrik as her co-ruler, then let it have him as its sole king. Roughly a year after her accession, Ulrika Eleonora announced to the Riksdag her fervent desire to abdicate the throne in favor of her husband. It was an unprecedented act, a gesture of complete and unconditional self-sacrifice in the name of love. She was prepared to give everything: the crown, the power, her historical legacy, just so her beloved could have what he so passionately desired. She made only one condition: if Fredrik were to die before her, the crown would revert to her. The Riksdag was perplexed, but after lengthy debates, they agreed. Perhaps, weary of the constant conflicts with the queen, they decided it would be easier to deal with her husband. Or perhaps they simply could not believe in such a degree of female devotion and searched for some hidden political calculation. But there was no calculation. There was only the blind, all-consuming love of a naive and downtrodden woman who saw a god in her husband and was ready to lay the world at his feet. In 1720, Ulrika Eleonora signed the act of abdication. With her own hands, she removed the crown from her head and placed it upon Fredrik's. He became King Fredrik I of Sweden. That day, accepting the ultimate power from his wife's hands, he publicly swore his eternal love, respect, and gratitude to her. Let us remember this moment. It was the culmination of his plan and the beginning of her greatest tragedy. She thought she was giving him a kingdom out of her boundless love. She did not yet understand that all along he had simply been using her love to get that kingdom. The moment the crown settled on his head, the mask fell. The man who had for years played the part of the ardent lover and devoted husband revealed his true face to the world. Fredrik I, King of Sweden, who had received the throne from the hands of his adoring wife, did the most unexpected thing of all. He lost all interest in the affairs of state. It turned out that his obsessive drive for power was not fueled by a thirst for great deeds, but merely by a desire to access the material benefits that came with it. For him, the crown was not a symbol of responsibility, but a key to the treasury, a ticket to a world of boundless pleasure. And he plunged headlong into this world, making up for years of pretense and calculated restraint. Life at court became one continuous fiesta. The king, who should have been rebuilding a country ravaged by war, concerned himself only with organizing lavish balls, wild drinking parties, and endless hunts. He surrounded himself with a company of cheerful hedonists, and Stockholm Castle, until recently a bastion of stern Protestant morality, now rang with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the whisper of bawdy jokes. He delegated state affairs to his chancellor and the Riksdag, who, to their surprise, found themselves with even more power than they had bargained for. The monarch himself dedicated his time to what interested him most in the world: women. Thus began an era of open, unbridled debauchery that shocked the conservative Swedish society. Ulrika Eleonora, having abdicated the throne, retreated to her chambers with a sense of relief. She was happy. She had rid herself of the unbearable burden of power and believed that now, at last, their quiet family life would begin. She formed a circle of friends, read a great deal, and devoted herself to charity, just as her mother once had. She lived in her own small, cozy world, contentedly watching her beloved husband enjoy the position she had given him. At first, only vague rumors of his escapades reached her, but she dismissed them as the malicious gossip of envious people. She loved him too much to believe in betrayal, but soon, ignoring the truth became impossible. Among the king's numerous fleeting affairs, one woman emerged who outshone all the others. Her name was Hedvig Ulrika Taube. She was the daughter of a member of the state council, a young lady-in-waiting of dazzling beauty from a noble family. When the king first noticed her, she was just 16. He was 54. This was not a mere dalliance. It was an obsession. The king lost his head. He showered the girl with gifts, wrote her poetry, and pursued her everywhere. Soon, their affair became common knowledge throughout the court. It was an unprecedented scandal. But Fredrik went even further. He decided his favorite should have an official status like the mistresses of the French kings. For the first time in Swedish history, a woman was granted the title of official royal mistress. It was a public slap in the face not only to the nation, but to his own wife. For Ulrika Eleonora, it was a blow from which she would never recover. The woman who had sacrificed everything for him received public humiliation in return. Her world, built on blind faith in his love, shattered in an instant. She found herself in a monstrous, unbearable position. The entire court, the entire country, now watched her tragedy with a mixture of pity and malicious glee. Courtiers advised her to pay it no mind, to rise above it. One of her chaplains offered her a comparison. As the moon continues on its path across the sky, paying no heed to the barking of dogs, so your majesty must disdain the gossip that this most unfortunate and blind affair has spawned. For a long time, she tried to follow this advice. She pretended to know nothing so as not to damage her beloved husband's reputation. On one occasion, she even walked through the palace garden arm in arm with the young Hedvig Taube, attempting with this gesture to quell the gossip. One can only imagine what that walk must have cost her. But the king did not appreciate her sacrifice. He grew ever more brazen. His affair with Hedvig continued for many years, and she bore him at least 4 children. He bestowed titles and riches upon her and their offspring. And one day, he made his final, most cruel mistake. He officially presented Taube at court. Ulrika Eleonora's patience snapped. She did not create a scandal, did not scream or accuse. She resorted to the only weapon she had known since childhood, her last refuge, passive resistance. She simply feigned illness and locked herself in her chambers, refusing to come out. This quiet, silent protest proved more effective than any words. The king was forced to retreat. Hedvig Taube never again appeared at official receptions, though her affair with the king, of course, continued. The scandal also had political consequences. The members of the Riksdag were outraged. They summoned the king and reminded him of the oath to respect his wife that he had taken when accepting the throne from her. They stated plainly that by taking an official mistress, he had violated that oath, and therefore the terms of their deal. Abdication was in the air, but this time for Fredrik himself. However, he found a cynical way out. He declared that his personal life was no one's concern, and that his oath to respect his wife had nothing to do with his marital fidelity. After much turmoil, everything remained as it was. And so, the unfortunate Ulrika Eleonora, having given everything for love, received her final, most brutal disappointment. She was deceived, humiliated, and used by the man who had been her entire world. And to top it all off, they never had children. Her sacrifice was not only tragic, but utterly barren. A life devoid of love and hope slowly faded away in the silence of the palace chambers. Ulrika Eleonora became a living shadow, a sad symbol of betrayed trust and violated dignity. But the paradox of history is that it was in her greatest humiliation that she found what she had lacked her entire life: the love and respect of her people. Her tragedy unfolded before the eyes of the entire nation, and they saw everything: her quiet suffering, her noble silence, her unbroken pride. And set against this was the brazen, selfish behavior of her husband, the party king, who had traded a faithful wife and his duty to the state for fleeting pleasures. The contrast was stark, and the sympathies of the nation, from the aristocrats in the Riksdag to the common peasants, were entirely on her side. She became not just a pitiful victim, but a moral victor in this sordid affair. Her humility, her kindness to others, her deep piety, all that had once seemed a sign of weakness, now shone with a new light. In her, they saw a true queen, even without a crown. Whispers began to circulate through the country. It was said that a plot was brewing in the Riksdag. Several influential political factions, weary of Fredrik's antics and sympathetic to his wife, began to secretly prepare a coup d'etat. The plan was simple and bold: depose the unfaithful king and return the throne to its rightful owner, Ulrika Eleonora. The offers were relayed to her through trusted intermediaries. She was promised full support and the restoration of justice. This was her chance, a chance to take revenge, to reclaim her power and dignity, to punish the traitor and rewrite the ending of her life. Any other woman in her place would have seized the opportunity. But Ulrika Eleonora was not any other woman. She listened to all the proposals and decisively rejected them. Why? Perhaps she was too broken to embroil herself in a political struggle once more. Perhaps she feared bloodshed and turmoil in the country. Or perhaps, and this is the most likely reason, even after everything he had done to her, a dying ember of that first and only love still glowed in her heart. She had given him the crown, and she would not take it back. She had made her choice many years ago and remained true to it, even when he had trampled upon her loyalty. She preferred to remain a tragic victim rather than become a vengeful fury. Her earthly journey ended as quietly and inconspicuously as it had begun. In 1741, another smallpox epidemic swept through Stockholm, the very disease that had once claimed her brilliant sister. And this time, the merciless illness found its victim in the royal palace. Ulrika Eleonora fell ill and quickly faded. She departed this world at the age of 53, mourned by all, lamented, and paradoxically, deeply respected. Her passing was the quiet finale to a loud drama, the final punctuation in the story of a woman who was born a plain princess, served as an incompetent queen, became a humiliated wife, and ultimately was remembered by her people as a holy martyr. It would seem that with Ulrika Eleonora's passing, golden times should have begun for her rival, Hedvig Taube. The path to the throne was now clear. She, the mother of the king's children, the monarch's longtime beloved, already saw herself as the new Queen of Sweden and her sons as future heirs to the throne. Her spirits lifted. She began making plans, hinting to the king about a long-awaited marriage. But fate, that ironic jester, had prepared a very different script for her. King Fredrik was in no hurry to lead his favorite to the altar. He was enjoying his freedom, and it seemed was already beginning to tire of her domineering nature. And just 3 years after Ulrika's death, Hedvig followed her to the grave. She did not survive another childbirth, leaving the king with one more child and her shattered dreams of a crown. Did Fredrik grieve? Perhaps, but not for long. The vacant spot by the aging monarch, ever hungry for youthful beauty, was not empty for long. Less than a year after Taube's death, he presented his second official mistress to the court. She was Katharina Ebba Horn, another dazzling beauty from a noble house. As it later turned out, negotiations with her parents over the terms of her engagement with the king had begun almost immediately after his first favorite had breathed her last. This new passion, however, proved to be a woman with character. She had no intention of tolerating the king's whims and infidelities. After just 3 years, fed up with his caprices and unfaithfulness, she caused a grand scandal, presented him with a long list of grievances, and resigned from her position. Not empty-handed, of course. As compensation for moral damages, she received several wealthy estates from the king, which allowed her to become one of the richest women in the country. After that, she happily married a man who, it was rumored, had loved her long and devotedly even before her royal misadventure. She was perhaps the only woman who, upon encountering Fredrik, not only emerged unscathed, but managed to profit from the experience and build her own happiness. And what of the king himself? He passed away without leaving any legitimate heirs. His reign entered Swedish history as the Age of Liberty, not because he was a wise reformer, but because he had completely detached himself from affairs of state, allowing Parliament to run the country. The throne he had acquired at such a cost, through the betrayal and humiliation of a loving woman, brought him neither glory nor happiness, nor the continuation of his dynasty. He is remembered by posterity only as a hedonist king, a weak and selfish ruler. Looking back on this chain of intrigues, betrayals, and shattered lives, one cannot help but ask, is this what his great predecessor Charles XII fought and died for? For the Swedish throne to become the stage for a cheap farce? And so, this was the life story of the plain queen. Unfortunately, she was not just plain, she was also deeply unhappy. Her fate is a bitter reminder that in a world obsessed with the outer shell, a pure heart and a devoted soul are often the most defenseless targets. She lost on almost every front imaginable, yet in her quiet tragedy, she claimed one ultimate victory. She remained human to the very end.